Everyone, it's your boy Matt here. It is Thursday, the 21st of August 2025. I'm at the Mercure Hotel in Canberra. This is kind of the place where all the defence guys kind of hang out. Neither here nor there about that. The reason why I'm shooting today is a couple of reasons. First of all, I've done this a few times, so this might be my last beers. I'm going to get back into training, working towards being an athlete again. That tends to be what gets me back into shape. But also, I specifically chose to come here because I want to talk about defence. I want to talk about David McBride. I want to talk about what I've been doing and how that relates to his work. So David McBride is a whistleblower. He was a lawyer with the Australian SAS in Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, the SAS were committing some war crimes, and at the same time, he had concerns that the SAS were also being interfered with their operational effectiveness by policies, by upper leadership. In general, in the Defence Force, and this is something that I witnessed and had a significant impact on my life, there were frustrations that the senior leadership have more of an interest in appealing to the public and mainly appealing to government ministers and looking good in front of their bosses than producing results for the people down the bottom, operational effectiveness and in actual outcomes. And as a result, what happened is that a whole lot of war crimes which were being committed by the SAS, and the information from these war crimes, which made it all the way up to senior leadership, were being sort of pushed away, thrown under the carpet, and hidden. And David McBride tried very hard to bring this to light because, first of all, people were being killed for no good reason. And on top of this, there were the frustrations that really it was not possible for there to be operational effectiveness in a hearts and minds mission, which was what was going on in Iraq and Afghanistan. We're trying to win over the local population. You don't get that by killing civilians. He also had concerns that there may have been issues with how individual members of the SAS were being treated, and some were being treated as scapegoats for problems which were really the results of higher leadership. Now, this is something which I saw when I was at the Naval College when I was 19. I talk about my friend, and I call him Brad in a video as a pseudonym. I think I accidentally used his actual name at one point. And what happened is that we had another colleague in the Naval College who made a fake rape allegation against him. And this was during the time where there was the ad for sex scandals. What happened with Brad is that he lost the proper trajectory of his life. He wanted to be a Navy pilot. He wanted to be a helicopter pilot. He was very smart. He was very cocksure. But what happened is that he was dragged through this hell at a very young age. He was falsely accused of rape, and because there was all the issues with public perception in the military at the time, the leadership of the organization pinned it all on him, this poor kid. He was 18 at the time. He was a really immature kid, and so was the girl who made the false rape allegation. Time has passed. I don't hold this against that midshipman, but this is something terrible which happened. And that experience, on top of also being bastardized at the college myself, altered my development as a person. And that's why I really understand what McBride's doing, and I 1000% agree with it. And that's why, at the same time, whilst I am deeply traumatized by my service with the military, I also acknowledge the best parts of the military culture, which McBride is currently demonstrating by going through with his whistleblowing, holding people who have maintaining his responsibility for his people, because as a military leader you are responsible for your people, and going through the process he is needed to do to address cultural issues in the institution. My hope is that by the end of his project, we're going to figure out a institutional intervention for the military which will more effectively address these problems. Because the attitude that I've seen so far with upper leadership is that they'll just get angry and they'll diminish and they'll abuse the people under their command. They will say abuse. I'm not sure if I agree with Angus's, I think it's Angus Matheson's approach to removing the Distinguished Service Commendation from the SAS. I'm not sure that was the solution. There's this tendency for them to admonish people lower down rather than looking at the systemic cultural problem and trying to address that problem. There's this idea of, I don't know, there's this false idea about accountability in these institutions, and we don't so much need accountability as we need cultural reform. And we need people to orientate themselves towards the objectives of operational effectiveness, rather than getting caught up in these bullshit stories that they're telling themselves about these circumstances. Now, the intervention for that is something that we would look, where we would get industrial psychologists in or anthropologists in to study the organization and come up with a solution. That's the next step, which I recommend to deal with these problems with defense. The other thing is that we need to get the senior leaders to start pushing back on government ministers. I have used David McBride's story as a means of promoting issues with AUKUS because I understand Navy enough and I understand submarines to understand what's happened with AUKUS, where we've gotten into this horrific deal with the Americans, which will compromise the independence of Australia, where we're not going to have a submarine capability for a period of time. That submarine capability is our most important capability. It is more important than all that fancy special forces stuff. Okay? Submarines are what keeps our independence. It allows us to have a nation because it stops us from being able to be invaded. And it allows us to also see the enemy before they're here. AUKUS happened because our senior military leadership didn't tell the government ministers that this is a terrible fucking idea. The war crimes which happened in Afghanistan were pushed under the rug because the government ministers didn't want to the senior military leadership didn't want the government ministers to look bad. So we also have this failure of moral character and moral leadership in senior military authority. So we also need to figure out how we can have a relationship between senior leadership and government ministers where the senior military leadership are able to push back against really shitty ideas from government ministers. Because we got this AUKUS thing because our previous Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, wanted to win an election. And the way that you do that as a Liberal leader is that you do a big defence bill and what sounds special, nuclear submarines. We don't need them. The Submariners didn't want them, but the Navy leadership didn't want them, but the taxpayer might, and the people who support our boys in blue and our boys in green might. And that's how we got that problem. So what I want you to do today is I want you to write a letter, and this is what I'm going to be doing. I call David McBride my friend. I'm not pushing a personal relationship on the guy. It's me saying that he's my comrade and I'm oriented in the same direction that he is in. I want you to write a letter to this address. He's currently at the Alexander Macanucci Centre. This is the prison in Canberra. To write him a letter, it goes to Locked Bag 7775, Canberra, BC, ACT 2609. Alright? I'm going to get around to doing that today. I'd like you all to do the same. Have a lovely day, everyone.